The path to mastery leads through the heart of adversity. Challenge is the raw material from which courage and strength are forged. Warriors are not defined by events. Warriors define them. Warriors conquer themselves before all else. Warriors are relentless in their service to others. Join us as we open our hearts and hone our minds to a razor's edge. It doesn't matter how slow you go, only that you do not stop. Your time is now. And now your host, Jason McKenzie.
Hello, you amazing people. Welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Warriors podcast. So first of all, if you want to support the show, there's a couple things you can do. I would love if you would leave a rating and review on iTunes, preferably if it's good. It helps us get found, and we're moving up the charts, which is kind of cool. So if you just, it literally takes a couple minutes, like not even a couple minutes, 30 seconds from your phone, your podcast app. So that would be great. Also, if you could share the episodes, if you hear something that sounds important to you or just like something that might be important to somebody you know, just click share and that would be amazing. And the other thing you can do is support us on Patreon. So patreon.com/mentalhealthwarriors. And that's a site where you can, people can support the creators of the content that they love. So enough about that. And thank you for your support and your ongoing support, actually. But enough about that. This is a really, really cool conversation with a really interesting guy. So I think you're really going to like this podcast because this guy has got a crazy experience. He went from, so his name's John Mabry, and he went from basically losing a leg to, making a career in acting, getting some amazing success, actually, and, running with some really cool people, hanging with Adam Sandler and Dave Grohl of Foo Fighters. He was in Superbad, which is absolutely hilarious because I say in the podcast, I watched that with my daughter the other night. I didn't tell my wife, a couple weeks ago, I didn't tell my wife, so if she hears this, I'm basically dead. But there's a hilarious scene in the beginning, and John was the guy who was in that scene. So when you hear him talk about it on the podcast, you will, if you're a fan of the movie Superbad, you'll know exactly where he's talking about. I don't know if you can hear that, but my kids are upstairs and they're making chocolate chip cookies. And I think they are hopped up on chocolate at this point. So they're carrying on up there pretty good. So, but anyways, but throughout this entire time, John had major issues with addiction. And upon finding out his brother was dead, actually finding his dead brother, he really went off the rails. And it's just an incredible story of trauma and adversity, and then like this heady intoxication of success, and then like not being able to, like thinking you've got your demons at bay, but not being able to outrun them. And it's just an amazing story. But I think what the most important lesson is in the story is that, and we talk about this near the end, is that you never stop trying, right? Like not everything, as you are trying to claw your way from the very bottom and figure out how to move forward and piece your life back together, you never stop trying because you're going to run into obstacles and you're going to fail and you're going to feel dejected, but you can't. Well, you can stop. Fuck, you can choose to stop if you want. But if you want to actually fundamentally create a different life, then do not stop. And you never know where your choices are going to take you. So what you view as a failure right now might end up actually turning out to be, the thing that happened to you that creates the greatest success that you could have ever imagined. Like you can't see the ending from where you're standing right now. So the point is that the road forward is not straight, and it's not linear to get from here to there. So if you embrace the fact that the struggle is actually the journey and that the setbacks are, very, very teachable moments, you look at it with a different mindset. And I'm not going to go into this in too much more detail because I'm going to do a podcast about this because this is specifically about this because this is actually one of my favorite subjects. And I think it's something a lot of people need to hear. So having said all that, let me tell you a little bit about John. And then we will get into the podcast. And I think you're going to love this story because, man, it is freaking crazy. Okay, so John Mabry serves as the Director of Public Outreach and the host of High Sobriety Podcast for addiction campuses. He has a master's in counseling, is an inventor, award-winning speaker. An inventor? We didn't actually talk about that. Darn, I should have him back on. Award-winning speaker, actor, and stuntman with 12 years in the Screen Actors Guild. He's worked on NCIS, ER, Superbad, freaking love that movie, and many others, and has been featured in People Magazine, USA Today, Access Hollywood. He's completed in triathlons. He's a leg amputee, recovering alcoholic and an addict, and the surviving brother of an addict. So Johnny went from parties at the Playboy Mansion with Adam Sandler and Emma Stone to living in a trailer on the banks of the Cumberland River in Tennessee. So I kind of feel like those two things are significantly different. I kind of feel like that trailer was probably quite a bit different than the Playboy Mansion, but you'll hear John talk about that in the episode. Out of all the turmoil arose the opportunity for Mabry to develop Addiction Campus's drug-free workplace training program and he hosts a high sobriety podcast. Recent guests on his show include members of the Grammy-winning rock bands Korn and Three Doors Down, singer Chuck Negron from Three Dog Night, as well as many other leaders and authors in the field of addiction and mental health. John lives in Nashville with his wife of 13 years and their 3 children. And as he talks about in the episode, his wife is a freaking saint. So you're going to enjoy this episode. And actually, John introduced me to the wife of the drummer of Korn. So she's actually going to come on the Mental Health Warriors podcast, which is super, super exciting. Very, very generous of him to do that. And she sounds like an amazing woman. So I cannot wait to have her on, but that's in the future. And we are always focused on the present because life happens in the present, right? So guys, listen, enjoy this podcast. Thanks to John for coming on, man. Your story is incredible. You inspired the hell out of me. And it's absolutely incredible to me that you kept pushing forward through all the adversity and you are relentlessly working to develop self-awareness and self-mastery, and you're living a life of service to others. And that's what the Mental Health fucking Warriors podcast is all about. So enjoy the episode. We'll see you on the other side. Oh, yeah, and there's one other thing. We had a little bit of a technical problem at the beginning. The audio quality wasn't the best. So if you find that a bit annoying for the first 10 minutes or so, it gets better. We ended up switching to another platform. So yeah, it's an occupational hazard of being a army of one here. So we figured it out and it gets better. So I just want to give you a heads up about that, and enjoy. And thanks again for listening. Hey, John, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, man. Really, it's an honor to be here. So thank you.
Yeah, I read your, first of all, thank you for reaching out. And I read your bio and I'm like, oh my God, where should we start? So maybe I'll do something that I don't typically do and pitch it back over to you and say, where do you think we should start this, what I'm sure is going to be an amazing conversation?
Yeah, man. It's growing up as a kid, I had kind of a really easy upbringing, and I never anticipated having so much turmoil and life being flipped upside down. And I kind of thought if I had, everything kind of lined up the way it was supposed to go, everything was going to be all right. And life has thrown numerous curveballs that have been, completely life-changing, and some significantly, horrible, and some significantly, wonderful. So I guess we'll just start off. Yeah, let me just say, give people some teasers. Had a easy upbringing. Lost a leg from a leg amputation, lost a brother from overdose, spent over a decade in active addiction myself, PTSD, anxiety, depression, all that stuff, and ended up going from parties at the Playboy Mansion to living in a trailer on the side of the Cumberland River outside of Nashville, Tennessee. And today I'm grateful to be able to be sober and giving back. Working in the treatment industry. So that's just kind of a broad overview. Let me go into
awesome.
a little bit of how things kind of progress, if that's all right for you.
Yeah, of course, that'd be great.
So, born and raised in Texas, had a wonderful family, wonderful upbringing, wonderful support system around me. Pretty much spoiled. I mean, had everything that I needed and most everything that I wanted. And I got into sports early on, and that was a good, healthy outlet for me. But going into high school, the class clown started to really surface, and personality really started to kind of become eccentric, and following the rules started to not apply to me. and cutting, just simple things like cutting in line, or if we're expected to do this, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to also do it, add my own little twist to it, do it my own way. And that kind of comes out a little bit later in my story. So I'm just kind of prefacing that right now. But I think I've talked to a lot of people in recovery or who are struggling with substance use disorder, as they didn't really fit into the normal mold, and there was just something that they kind of were outside the normal box of normal people. And so I could start to relate to that.
That sounds really familiar, man.
Yeah,
that sounds like me too.
Yeah, it's not something a lot of people talk about, but if you really think about it, if you go and look at people in treatment or getting help for mental health or substance, use disorder, so many of them are like, yeah, man, I never really wanted to follow the rules, and everybody tried to fit me in this box. And the more they tried to do that, the more I wanted to break out of it, and the worse things got. And so I started seeing signs of that in high school, where I wanted to be Mr. Personality. And I, going into my senior year, I was varsity basketball for a few years, just real healthy, mind and body. I got my main goal. My main goal senior year wasn't really to graduate necessarily; it was to get class clown. And I was dead set. I'm getting class clown. That'll be a feather in my cap. And next thing you know, senior year rolls around. We're at prom, and I get invited up, and I'm named class clown, most outgoing, most school spirited, and best personality, all kind of back to back. And I thought that was pretty cool, and I took that into college and chalked that up to, hey, look at me, I'm Mr. Ego, and I got everything going for me, and I got a lot of friends. And I carried that mindset into college. I was Mr. Social, went to Baylor University, where my parents had gone to school, and I had cousins that went there and friends. And so it was just an easy transition for me to move 3 hours north of San Antonio, where I was born and raised, up to Waco to go to college, and pretty much breezed through college, did the fraternity thing, just drinking, didn't really do much drugs, didn't really feel the need to. And senior year rolls around, I'd built up this Mabry empire, as I call it. I had built this facade up that I had it all together, and I was in control, and everything was going the way I wanted it to. So much so that I had a full ride scholarship.
Did you believe that?
Yeah, man. I was on top of the world. Nothing could stop me. Nothing bad had really ever happened to me. Everything was just easy. And so I had no reason to believe that I couldn't just keep, achieving whatever I set out to do. It's kind of whatever I put my mind to, it kind of came to fruition without a whole lot of trouble. And so senior year, I had earned a full ride scholarship. I was a communications major, and so I found a way where I could video. I could get hours for classes, for intern hours, and then I could also get paid by the university to do video work for the athletic teams. And so I filmed football and basketball games and practices, and we did some volleyball and baseball. But so I got the same scholarship the athletes got, and so there goes my ego. I'm like, man, yeah, I'm an athlete. It's like, and I'm just a scrawny little white guy from San Antonio. I don't know what I'm doing, but I got a camera and a two-way radio and a full ride scholarship, and so I'm sitting pretty. I'd also started dating one of the cheerleaders, and she ended up being voted in as our fraternity sweetheart, and I was social chair of our fraternity. And so I was just all over campus setting up social events with sororities for our fraternity. Again, couldn't have been going better. And senior year rolls around here. Spring break comes, and I'm thinking, man, I'm almost out. We got to go out big. So I set up this cruise, spring break kind of booze cruise with a bunch of friends, and we take a ship out of New Orleans and to the Caribbean. Had a blast. I got to go for free since I set the trip up, and so we're coming back from this booze cruise, this picture perfect lifestyle, and the unexpected happened. And 7 seconds, it just changed everything. And nobody was doing anything wrong. We had a car accident where a tire blew out in a friend's car. My friend's SUV, we were coming back from New Orleans back to Waco outside of Houston. Tire blows out, and the whole world just slows down. You hear the stories of your life flashing before your eyes, and I experienced that. I experienced envisioned my life as a movie, and my movie was about to end. It's sometimes at the end of movies, they go to color bars, it goes beep, and you see the color bars pop up. Well, I was waiting for all mine to just turn to black. Just, have the film fade to black. And as the car hits the median, starts shaking violently as the tire blows out, and we're veering toward the median. As soon as we hit the grass, the SUV does a 180, and we just start rolling. And witness reports say we rolled anywhere between 6 and 12 times across the other side of the interstate into a field. And it comes to a stop, all the crashing and the glass and the metal and all that, just, silence. And I'm going, oh my gosh, I'm still alive. I'm still here. And I saw it all happening, and somehow my legs got out the window. I tried to pull them in with all my might, and I just couldn't, just completely out of my control. So I tried to get out of the car as soon as I could. I was thinking the car was going to blow up, because that's what happens in the movies. And I crawl out, and as I'm trying to get out of the car, I look down, and I see my right foot had wrapped around. The ankle was split about 3/4 of the way around. And so it was kind of just dangling, basically. The foot was dangling by some fibers at the end of my shin. And so I could see the bottom of my foot wrap around up as I tried to stand up. And so I just threw myself out of the car. I crawled out as fast as I could, and I looked back, and all 3 of my friends were still in the car. And I'm sitting there going, my options are to stay out here and be safe, or go in and try to help them out, because if the car blows up and I'm not trying to help, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. So crawled back in, got one friend out. Other 2 were, one was pinned in. The driver was pinned in from head trauma from the car. And so her boyfriend was up front tending to her, my friends Spence and Ashley. And so I just got my one friend out that I could, crawled out. The way it all unfolded, long story short, they had to cut Ashley out of the car. They pull her out of the car. They land a helicopter on the side of the interstate. They put her in the helicopter and fly her off, and she passes away before they got her to the closest hospital. And her name was Ashley Furman. And I try my best in interviews, and when I talk about the story, to remember her name. She was just a sweet soul that was only 19 years old and didn't do anything wrong. I mean, she had the car set on 70 on the interstate, couldn't have done anything differently. And so it ended up leading to me having 14 surgeries that year. And coming from the lifestyle that I just described to you, everything was easy. Everything just kind of went in my favor. I didn't have to try real hard for things to just kind of fall in my lap. Now all of a sudden I'm forced with, major adversity, fighting for my life and my leg, and painkillers entered the picture at that point. And so through all those surgeries, infections kept coming back. I would go back from living with my parents to going back to trying to move back to school, try to get back involved in classes. Infection would set in. I'd have to come back for another surgery. So it was just this year of complete instability and chaos and pain, disappointment after disappointment. And finally, at a year, opted to go ahead and decide to amputate my leg below the knee. So, that's not one you can take back. It's not like golf where you hit a bad shot and can I get a mulligan on that one? Take another shot on that.
Yeah.
So, but what really helped was being able to talk to some amputees who had been through that process before and seeing that they were living, healthy, relatively normal lives. And so went ahead and decided to do it. And 6 weeks later, I walked the stage to get my diploma under my own power on a temporary prosthetic. And really at that point, just tried to set out to show everybody I was fine, show everybody I could do this. And what really set the tone, that I don't share this a whole lot. I don't know why it doesn't come up more, but it's coming up for me now. So I feel like it's important to share is I had a friend or several friends and family members right when the accident happened that they said, hey man, if this is going to happen to somebody, it might as well happen to John because he can handle it. And I didn't think much of it other than, oh, well, I better handle this. And then when I told a therapist this years later, she said, well, how did that work out for you? And I never really gave it much thought. And once I thought about it, I was like, Yeah, that was pretty detrimental. For people to put that expectation on as, oh, you better be able to handle this because we think you can. That just kind of set me up for not being able to not wanting to ask for help, or not feeling that I could break down, not feeling that I didn't know the answer or didn't know how to overcome some of the, stuff I was going through. And so I bottled it up. I just kept it in. I'm supposed to be able to handle this. I'm not supposed to break down. I'm not supposed to cry and get angry. And, there's times when I just wanted to throw crutches across the room, or I was on a walker and I just wanted to, throw that out the window of a moving car, and, jump out of a moving car myself from going to these, doctor's appointments time and time again.
Okay, so we're back. We had a little technical issue, but we're nothing if not flexible here on the Mental Health Warriors podcast. So we'd kind of gotten to the point where you were talking about, the leg amputation, what happened. And what I wanted to know was, what was it like to make the decision to actually go ahead with amputating your leg? Like, was it you had been through so much, trauma for so long. I mean, was it almost a relief to make the decision? Or, I can't even imagine what goes through somebody's head in that moment.
Yeah, it was kind of a relief. So I told myself at the site of the accident, I saw my leg, I saw how bad it was. And so I told myself in my mind, they're going to amputate my leg. Like, there's no way I can survive, my leg can survive this. So it was always in the back of my mind that there was an option. And as we started, going and seeing doctors and trying different things, there was hope that we could salvage it and piece it back together. And we ended up I had a big hole in the side of the foot. And so we ended up taking one of my abdominal muscles out in one surgery, and they attached that into the hole in the foot, took skin off my hip and did a skin graft over that. Spent 3 nights in ICU just for, beginning recovery from that surgery. And so when it came down to it, all of a sudden I started to lose bone structure. Like my ankle started to collapse internally. And so I had a sole, like a shoe with a big sole built on it. And I had a cane and a brace that went up to my knee. I'm like 23-year-old guy trying to, graduate college. And I've got this, not something I wanted to be dragging around the rest of my life. And so it started to become more apparent that I was like, man, this thing I think is just going to keep going on and on and on. And so the final decision, after I met with a few amputees and saw that they had to make some adjustments, and it wasn't always easy necessarily, but I realized that I could have a better quality of life letting it go. And so the decision to actually do it wasn't as bad as I thought, as one may think, being, in as much pain and instability as I was going through that year. I think my parents actually my dad in particular had a tougher time with it than I did. If you can imagine your son going, oh my God, that's a major decision. I don't want my son to be that disabled for the rest of his life,
No kidding.
So I think he took it harder than I did, where I was kind of like, man, let's do this. Let's move on.
And what's the recovery like from that? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So, man, here's the thing, physical recovery, easy. That was easy for me. I was young, pretty active. So that was like the easy part. The hard part was the emotional part, the mental. The mental part was something that really is what drove me for turn into addiction for over a decade to numb out. And so the physical part, I was playing golf probably 9 holes, maybe 3 months later, I could go out and I went bungee jumping and skydiving within the first year. Then year 2, I was doing some triathlons. So the physical part was kind of, I got this, but it's that mental piece.
And what was the emotional issues? Was it like to do with the trauma of it all, or not being whole in some way, or trying to fit in and adjust to a normal life, or being self-conscious, or maybe all of those things in some way?
Yeah. So, man, that brings up this whole can of worms. Is a great question. And whenever I do talks around the country on my story and on trauma and substance use disorder and mental health, I always bring this up. It took me years and years and years and multiple rounds of treatment to figure this out. And so I love that you asked that question. That I can share it with the audience today is, so I thought my problem started at the accident. Life was fine. I was normal. Everything was going, smoothly until I had this car accident. My leg gets cut off. I'm part robot now. I have this robotic leg. Now I feel kind of like a freak. Painkillers entered the picture, and things got worse from there. But what actually happened was I had a trauma. When I finally went to this trauma therapist, I said, I'm dealing with trauma, and I should go see somebody that specializes in trauma, not just a general psychiatrist or psychologist. So I call her on the phone. We have a phone consultation, and I don't even see her in person. And 10 minutes into my story, she asked me, tell me your story. What are we looking at? And I said, saw a friend die in an accident, had my leg cut off. I found my brother dead from an overdose, so on and so forth. And she said, okay, well, thank you for sharing with those things with me. What I'm really concerned about is what happened to you as a child. And I was like, what? Like, who are you? Like, nobody's ever asked me what happened in my childhood. And like I said to you earlier, I said, man, I had a great childhood. Everything was, smooth, and couldn't have asked for more support. And she goes, I'm sure you had a great childhood. What happened? And again, I'm just dumbfounded. Like, what is she talking about? And so I threw out the only thing I could think of was I had some ear surgeries as a kid. It wasn't a big deal. Let's move on. And she goes, no. She goes, when you come in and see me, that's where we're going to start. And I guarantee you that's where your problem started. So I'm going, what? Like, stuff happens 25 years ago. That doesn't affect me today. So come to find out, I go in, she gives me some plain white pieces of paper and crayons. And she said, I want you to draw on this first piece of paper. What do you remember from your first surgery? So I had 6 ear surgeries from the time I was about 6 to 15. And as intricate as a transplanted eardrum and the 3 bones in that ear, my left ear, are prosthetic bones. So I had multiple infections and tubes, and then it led to eardrum transplant and then prosthetic bones having to be put in. So come to find out through a series of, sessions with her and drawing this, it's called a graphic narrative. She had me draw stuff out on, I can't draw, I just draw stick figures. And she said, didn't matter, just what do you remember? And so we draw this kind of scene out over several sessions, and we put it up on the wall, and she allows me to tell the story back to her. So now it's getting out of my head and out of my heart onto paper. And then I'm able to sit back and look at it like a movie and read it to her. And I can separate myself from being in those situations any further. But what came out of that was the fact that from an early age, I felt defective. I felt different. I felt broken. I'm unfixable. Something wrong with me that's not wrong with everybody else, and nobody knows about it. I had this dirty secret that I couldn't, nobody would really understand if I told them. And so I have like scars behind my ear, and I had to have my head shaved on that side when I was having these surgeries. And so I felt like a freak, man. I really did. And I never put any kind of, thought into it of that could lead me to, sure enough, class clown in high school. I got class clown, most outgoing, most school spirited, and best personality. And she pointed out, she goes, that's a 100% direct result of the fact that early on, from an early age, in your being, in the cells of your body, you felt broken, defective, insecure, not good enough. And so you overcompensated in these other ways to divert people seeing how scared you really were as a child.
Man, I love that you are talking about this because it's so interesting, because your experience kind of, the initial experience mimics the one I had with my first wife. So without going into the story, because I've told it a million times, she passed away. She died by suicide. She was mentally ill, or quote, mentally ill. But here's the thing. When she was experiencing this massive emotional dysregulation and all this kind of stuff, she went to a psychiatrist, finally got a referral to a psychiatrist. And I thought a psychiatrist was like, if you remember Frasier, like you go talk to Niles Crane laying on the guy's couch or whatever. And, it was nothing like that, of course, and just prescribed medication. And so she ends up passing away. But in her entire history of treatment, quote, treatment, I don't think anybody ever asked her, hey, what happened to you? Because she was, a victim of sexual abuse and physical abuse, and her mother was mentally ill and all this kind of stuff. And when I talk to guys now, so in my mental health warriors community, I talk to guys and I'm like, they're struggling, they're in their 30s and their 40s and they're feeling anxious and depressed and not worthy and like fucking failures and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And, you talk to them and the first question I always ask is like, tell me what happened to you. And I'm no therapist, but I mean, tell me what happened to you. And there's always 100% of the time, man, there's something that happened. And I'm like, are you open to considering that what happened then might be affecting how you feel now? Like that it's a thread that runs through your life. And I think that a lot of times guys, and I'm only speaking about guys because that's who I talk to the most, but they think, well, I moved on or whatever. I forgot about it. Like I, got on with getting on or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or they know somehow that there's a relationship between their childhood and how they're feeling now, but they're too afraid to go confront it because some of the stuff that happened was horrible, right? So, oh man, I love that you're saying that because it's what happens to us. I don't know if it's epigenetics or whatever, but when the therapist talked about I've really come to believe that, we store these memories on some kind of cellular.
Yes.
Like our central nervous system, is all of us, all bits of us, all our cells, all our memories, all our, it's not just physical, it's much more than that. So anyway, sorry, my rant is over, but I love that you're talking about that because I totally agree with you.
No, man, it's so huge. I mean, and it can, oh man. So I don't hardly ever do a talk where I don't bring up childhood. And there's a term for it too. If anybody wants to go look it up, it's called adverse childhood experiences.
Yep.
If you go look up adverse childhood experiences, there's research out there. There's Dr. Gabor Mate that talks about it. It's got a great book out on it. And, our body stores these memories and these, like you say, on a cellular level. And one thing that I found that really helped release that is one recognizing that it's there and that it could, and just having some willingness to talk about it. But also using essential oils. And I always thought essential oils were like voodoo or witchcraft. And if you get all natural essential oils, they're frankincense, myrrh, there's basil, oregano, patchouli, lime. That just a whole host of essential oils that I always thought was voodoo stuff. And my grandparents used to use them, and my mom used to try to get me to use them. And I was like, that's crazy. And I came out of my first round of treatment in 2011 on 11 medications. All right. And having 11 medications is not ideal. And I have found through my experience, this isn't everybody's experience, but I found through my experience that I started to pick up on the fact that the medical industry wants me to stay sick. They want me to just kind of keep not really getting to the root cause of issues so that I keep making money off of me through medications. And so I had finally gotten to a point where I was like, maybe I'm having a little bit of willingness to try something new. Let me try these essential oils. And so as I've gone down from 11 medications to 2. Wow. So that's been a huge part of my recovery as well, is just all natural medicine, along with, diet, exercise, meditation, some of these other, kind of more holistic types of approaches. Because the medical, oh man, I was going to so many doctors. I've been through 25 surgeries. All right. I've been through under anesthetic 25 times. And I just got caught in the medical rat race of just doctor appointment after doctor appointment, medication after medication, prescription after prescription, dealing with, insurance. And now I can go do meditation for free. I can do, oils whenever I want, and I can have do whatever works for me, exercise, get the rest that I need, work on some diet, dietary changes. And I'm not perfect by any means, but I'm at least more conscious of it. And I found more benefit doing these more natural kind of remedies than the medical community wants me to take.
Oh, for sure. And it's so interesting that you talk about essential oils. So let's get into that a little later, because I was actually on a panel a couple of nights ago, just like a mental health kind of panel. And one of the women on the panel actually was talking about her experience as a teenager. And it was really fascinating because she had terrible acne. And so she was talking about the emotional impact of having acne and feeling ugly and being beautiful and all those, or not feeling beautiful and being made fun of. But she actually said that a critical part of her healing was essential oils. And I never heard someone say that before. So it's funny that we're actually 2 days later, you and I are talking about it too. So I'd love to come back and touch on that.
Sure.
So So now you are, now if I remember right, you start getting addicted to painkillers and that kind of stuff. So where does this progress from here? Because I mean, I feel like we've just scratched the surface of this crazy story you have.
So amputation was in car accident was March of 2000 in Texas. Amputation was in March of 2001. Graduated in May 2001 from college, and I moved to Dallas for about a year to just I had a kind of a normal job. I got out of a sales job that I had lined up while I was in, finishing up college. But in the back of my mind, after going through my amputation, I was like, man, I want to be able to help other people. People were there to help me. How can I put myself in a position to go help other people? And so I'm living in Dallas, and I'm really terrified. I'm really terrified as a young man coming out of school. I just had my leg amputated. And here's the story. I don't always share this, but I think it'd be important for your audience here is my car accident was part of a Firestone Ford Explorer rollover back in 2000.
I remember that.
Yeah, a lot of people younger than us, may not recall it, but Firestone tires, there was tread separating off the tires in conjunction with the Ford Explorer. They were rolling, killing people for years. They knew about it. And so we were part of that debacle prior to the millions of Firestone tires being recalled. And so the day before I got my diploma, I signed my settlement papers. And so you can imagine a 23-year-old kid who's just lost his leg, who's just trying to graduate, and I have a job I'm about to go off into the big city of Dallas to go, embark on, gets a pocket full of money and a pocket full of pain pills and alcohol, not really a good setup for a positive outcome without going through some tough times. So I move up to Dallas. I had, resources to do whatever I wanted to do. And I had this job for a few months, and I was like, man, my heart wasn't in it. I wanted to go help other people, but I also was scared of the responsibility. I was also like, man, I'm kind of in over my head. I'm a little overwhelmed right now. And so I just quit. One day I went in and said, look, this isn't for me. I quit. And so that opened up the door for me to start. I got more prescription pills. I got Adderall. I couldn't focus. So I go to the doctor and I'm getting Adderall. And then I start making GHB. I had heard about GHB. And next thing you know, here I am. Grew up in a Christian home, loving family. Next thing you know, I'm making drugs in my apartment in Dallas because I have nobody watching over me, nobody really keeping tabs on me. And it just, that's when things started to kind of like, the ball started rolling on not making decisions.
So I'm curious about why GHB. My only experience with GHB was back in my crazy rave days. And I remember being at this like after hours bar, and I took some GHB and I was so fucked up. And all I remember was sitting there and realizing I had completely pissed my pants. And I was like, oh my God. But no one cared. Like it was just, it was like 4:00 in the morning. Everybody was so messed up. But yeah, that was my one and only GHB experience. So why GHB?
Well, I had gone out on a trip to see a friend from high school in Los Angeles. And so that's right. I wanted to go skydiving. That was like a bucket list. I almost died in my car wreck. I never got a chance to go skydiving. So I had this bucket list, and one of them was to go to Venice and travel Europe. And so I did that prior to starting this job in Dallas. And one of my bucket list things was a skydive. So I visited a friend out in LA and went skydiving, and he had a roommate that was into it, introduced me to it. And so I get back home to Dallas and I'm going, man, I'm kind of bored. I got nothing to do. I got no job. I'm just sitting around wasting my life away. So I go online, figure out how to make it. And it's not, I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. It's very easy to it's very easy to take too much and pass out. And you find yourself in some pretty bad situations pretty quickly. At least I did. So through this time, I'm thinking, where can I go and get more education to go help other people? And I found out there's a great program in San Diego State, and there's a master's program in counseling. And so I ended up moving out to San Diego. I left everything I knew from Texas, moved out to San Diego, thinking new start. Let me go help other people. And really what it was a diversion from looking at my own stuff. And it wasn't a conscious decision necessarily, but it was just a way for me to let me go see how I can help other people in their problems. And then I don't really have to look at me and my own problems. And so my prescription pill abuse between Adderall, sleeping pills, and pain pills just got worse.
Isn't it amazing how one of the things I always try to teach my kids is how to develop self-awareness. And because I look at myself, and I mean, it's just exactly like you're saying. You're like, you want to go help other people, but you have no concept of what's actually going on in your own head and in your own heart. And like, I can remember just like being completely like a total fucking drunk, basically. And after the death of my wife and all this stuff, and everybody else could see it, but I was like, man, I'm cool. Like, I got my shit together here. Like, what's wrong with all you people? Like, it sounds so cliche that, to be saying that, like, it's the whole, it's not me, it's you. But that's how I looked at the world, man. And I feel like if I can give my kids the gift of a higher, a more developed sense of self-awareness, I think that's one of the best gifts like a parent can give a child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the biggest avenue for me to be able to have discovered that and continue to discover and uncover that is meditation, and we can talk about that a little bit further later on if you want, but that's been a huge player in helping me become more self-aware. But before I make decisions, if I'm sitting on something like, hey, should I go this way or this way? Let's just sit on it for a while. You don't need to make an impulse decision of what feels great right now, because I think that's what's the best thing for me. A lot of times it's just let it percolate a little bit. Talk to some trusted friends or sponsor or advisors or counselor or church pastor, bounce some of those ideas off of somebody else first and get some feedback before just pulling the trigger. Because in our crazy heads, man, it's like, oh yeah, it's a bit, why would I not do this?
Yeah.
And then you get into it and you're like, man, this is a bad decision.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm out of San Diego. I'm doing a master's program, and I'm just a model student. My whole life it's been about making sure I look good, and nobody had any idea that I was, doing anything behind the scenes. I was working for a nonprofit for getting my field hours. A great group called the Challenged Athletes Foundation that we raise money to get people with physical disabilities access to sports, and so I started doing some triathlons and helping raise money to get, running legs on kids and, basketball wheelchairs for, little Johnny in Omaha, Nebraska that wants to play on his basketball wheelchair team that couldn't afford a chair. We would provide those kinds of things for him. And so everything was looking really, really cool, really nice on the surface. But I met my wife of 13 years in Texas at Baylor, but I moved off. And she still had 2 years of school left. And so we dated and were engaged for 2 years. And I was in California and she was in Texas, and she had no idea the extent of what she was getting herself into, because we'd see each other in short periods of time, holidays and, 3-4 day weekends. And so in 2004, we got married and she moved out, and it wasn't 6 months into it, and she flew home to her parents in Chicago scratching her head going, wait, something's not right. Something's not adding up here. That John, he's not who I thought he was.
Did she see the extent of when she moved out? I mean, were you hiding what you were doing, or did she see?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she had no idea. I had no idea how bad I was. She had no idea how bad I was. There was nothing we could put our finger on. I wasn't being treated for PTSD. It was just basically anxiety, depression, and ADHD is what I was being treated for. And of course I wasn't being honest to doctors, and I just wanted to use, well, I don't think this amount of Adderall is working for me. I think I need more. Next thing you know, I'm taking, full month supply of Adderall in 7 days and not sleeping for days at a time. And so it was very frustrating as the spouse to not know what the problem was, but she just knew something wasn't right. And I kept bouncing around. I would take my pain pills and I would run out of those real quickly. And so then I would drink for, a week or two until I got my Adderall pills again. And then I would take the Adderall. And so I was just up and down. I'd drive to Tijuana and pick up pain pills from Tijuana. Find somebody on the street to give me some marijuana, whatever it was. I just had to have something underneath the surface to kind of ease the central nervous system was in such a heightened mode at all times from my PTSD that I just had to have something to calm that down at all times. But nobody could put their finger on it, so it was a really frustrating, disheartening time for my wife, who, by the grace of God, we're still together. And so as I graduate this program in 2005, I'm thinking there's no way I can go help other people. I haven't even begun to help myself. And as luck would have it, I got a call that my cousin's an actor. His name is Josh Henderson. He's not a household name by any means, but he's been on Desperate Housewives and a number of kind of big shows. He's actually the lead on a show on E. It's the E's first scripted series called The Arrangement. And they just had first season last year, and they're done shooting season 2, got picked up for season 2. That'll be coming out here in, I don't know, March or April maybe. So awesome. Be on the lookout. Just a shameless plug from my work. But he called me up and said, "Hey, I'm going to get my leg blown up in this show I'm doing called Over There." And it was on FX in 2005. Just lasted one season. But he called me up and said, "Hey, can you take me through what you went through in your car accident so I can connect with my character of losing my leg on roadside bomb, you lost your leg, kind of, roadside accident." So one thing led to another. They brought me up to meet the director and producer, and they said, "Hey man, you're hired. You got the job. You're a body double for your cousin." And my title was the technical consultant. So I was like, man, this is kind of a nice little deal. So
yeah, no kidding. Hey, wow, that's cool.
I got a full ride right up to Hollywood. I got my SAG card, my Screen Actors Guild, membership very easily by working on that show. And I didn't have to do a whole lot of work. I just kind of show up, and it wasn't my face, it was my leg. And I was like, man, this is pretty good little deal. Being a communications major, it kind of fit into my repertoire of being, working with cameras and lighting and all that stuff that was really interesting to me. And so People Magazine came out, Access Hollywood, and USA Today. And so we got some national coverage out of it. First cousins working together on this TV show. And so it was a fun little gig. And so I drug my wife kicking and screaming from San Diego to LA and said, "I'm going for it. Let's see what we can do with this. It's a nice little niche in the industry for the amputee and the wounded soldier. And let's see what we can do with it."
Yeah, I guess considering everything that was going on in the world at that time too, I mean, it sounds weird to think that could have been to your professional benefit, but I mean, I'm thinking of all the war on terror and that whole bit. That's really interesting.
Yeah, 2004, 2005, 2006, that's when, it was hot. And so I got an agent and started auditioning and made my way onto NCIS, ER, JAG, Brothers and Sisters. Did a film with Nick Cannon called American Son. Did another film called Sublime, just kind of a horror flick. Some of these just went straight to DVD. Probably didn't see them in the theaters.
Now, are these legit acting roles, or are these like body double roles?
Both, some of both.
Yeah, I'm not. One's not legit. That's not what I meant, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Some was just kind of, hey, mill around in the background and look like the amputee. Play the soldier. Some was speaking roles. And then some was just advising on script, like Cold Case, for instance. I got on Cold Case, I auditioned for the role, and they called me back in for a second read, and I didn't get it. They gave it to an able-bodied actor, but they said, "Hey, well, now we need somebody for the leg shot, so we need to make sure that things look accurate." So I would get hired on, kind of like Over There. I got hired on for the consultant, and oh my gosh, listen to this. So here's one, I've got to talk to my sponsor about the resentment, if this is true. But I had a guy, he approached me at the gym. I'm working out at the gym one day in Sherman Oaks, outside. And this guy comes up to me. He goes, "Hey, look, I'm a writer and a producer, and I see you got one leg. I've got this idea for a film where I want it to kind of be like a Die Hard kind of thing, where the main character is like Bruce Willis. We would have a big name for it, but he's going to be a wounded soldier, an amputee from the war. He's going to be a security guard. and we're going to have him in a warehouse in China. And I want to know, how far can I push this character? How far can we, can he have like a weapon inside of his leg? Can he ride a motorcycle? Can he do, what kind of stunts can he do? And so I met with him several times, went up to his house. He said, we're even thinking about having like a comic book. And so he brought this like artist out, and they put me on this motorcycle and took pictures and did some sketches. Come to find out, dude, during the Super Bowl last week, they have the commercial for The Rock's new film called Skyscraper. And I watched it back. I watched the commercial back the other day, and he's an ex-security guard, military security guard with a prosthetic leg, who's running security in this skyscraper building. That's basically it's a town in the sky. And so I don't know if this guy has anything to do with it or not, but if it does, he actually called me about 3 years ago. The guy who was writing it, and he goes, I don't know if this is still your number. I haven't talked to you in several years. I just wanted to know. He goes, I've gotten some more interest in the movie. I'd love to talk to you about it. But I was at a point in my recovery and in my sobriety where I didn't need to engage in any more Hollywood stuff.
Right.
Like, it was just not good for me. I need to stick to my program. I need to just be home with my family. And so I never called him back. And so I don't know if this actually is the film that he was talking about, because he was like, I'd want you in the film based in China. I mean, it's a whole deal. And so I don't know if this is true or not, but if it is, I missed out on it. But I'm okay because I'm sober. So
yeah, no kidding. So now at this point, so you're getting some acting gigs, and are you starting to, I mean, I don't know, obviously I have no idea how it works. It's awesome that we get to pull the curtain back a little bit. Like, but are you at the point where like, how does it work where you get into like the Hollywood, like lifestyle? Like, I mean, cause you're still like, I mean, you got the people like The Rock, like I'm sure there's all these tiers of, how famous you are or how much work you've done. Like, how does that all work?
Yeah. So the conundrum in the industry is you have to have a SAG, you have to have a SAG card and be a member of Screen Actors Guild to get any roles of significance, but you can't get and you have to get 3 credits to your name before you can get your SAG card. But to get a SAG card, you have to have a role of significance. And so it's like this, if you don't have a SAG card, you can't just be a background. You can't just like hang out in the background of a bunch of TV shows and films and get a SAG card. Like, it has to have like a speaking role, or you have to have some kind of, for me, it was being the consultant and being a technical consultant on set. That qualified me as getting a credit. So my first 3 shows that I did on over there, I got it, no problem, boom. And I was in. But some people spend years and years trying to get 3 SAG credits to their name. And so it's really hard to do. So I just kind of fell into that. But then it's all about who you know. At that point, it's just kind of who you know. And I was lucky that my cousin knew people. At the time when I was coming into town, he was dating Ashley Simpson. And so he was hanging out with Jessica and Nick Lachey back when they were filming Newlyweds. Mm-hmm. And so, we hung out with those guys a while. He's friends with Phil Jackson's son. And so one night we went to Cabana Club in Hollywood, closed down the Cabana Club at like 2 a.m. And the next thing you know, we're in a car and we're showing up in this Beverly Hills neighborhood. And we get out of the car and I'm like, where are we? And they're like, we're at Phil Jackson's house. And so next thing you know, we're bowling at Phil Jackson's house. And, another time, because of my cousin, we had he threw a New Year's party, and we were going to move the party. He was dating Kaylee Cuoco from Big Bang Theory, and she was on 8 Simple Rules at the time. And so we go to the party, and we're going to move the party from the Hollywood set we were on to Kaylee's condo. And my wife and I are up on Sunset just trying to grab a cab, and Andy Dick, who was at the party, jumps in the cab with us. And the next thing you know, Andy Dick's trying to make out with me and my wife in the back of this cab. And so, just stuff, stuff just happens. You don't have to look for it. It just kind of happens if you just hang out with, the right people.
And I mean, you must be thinking at this point, like, it is only going up from here, man.
Yes. Oh yes. And then it kept going up to where, I auditioned for Superbad. And if anybody out there is listening, there's a the
That's the best movie. I gotta say, my wife doesn't usually listen to all these podcasts, but my 14-year-old daughter and I watched that movie the other day, and I'm like, don't fucking tell your mother, man. I let you watch this, but oh my god, it was the best.
It's so bad. It's so bad, but so good. I mean, it's like the Animal House of our generation.
Yeah, for sure.
It's going to be around a while. But we audition for stuff. You don't know how big it's going to be, and I didn't even want the role because my one word's a curse word, and I didn't really want that for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have kids at the time, but I was like, I really just want to get in front of Allison Jones. Casting is the casting director for that. She cast for a lot of Seth Rogen and Steve Carell's roles, and that whole kind of group of guys.
Mm-hmm.
She does a lot of their casting, and so I was like, man, if I can just get in front of Allison Jones casting, and even if I don't get the role, that's fine. At least I'll just kind of show my face. And sure enough, I got it, and so we show up on set, and I run past Jonah Hill. I got the short track scene in the first 10 minutes of the film where I cruise past Jonah and just yell, "Pussy!"
Oh my god, that's hilarious. That's you?
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
man, that's great.
Yeah. So that was my claim to fame was that. And so then I was like, okay, well, if I get on this, and you shoot it, you don't know how big it's gonna be, and then it comes out and it it just takes off immediately. And so I was like, all right, well, this is cool. So I started building up some my ego. The ego's building back up, kind of like it was in high school and college. I'm back on top, and it really came to a head when we're next door neighbors with Catherine McPhee, who had just gotten second place on American Idol, and she moves into a condo right next to ours. And so we thought that was kind of a cool friendship. We went to their wedding, and we had keys to their place, and they keys to our place, and we'd let each other's dogs out if we weren't home. And so we got invited to her premiere for the House Bunny. She had released that, put out the House Bunny, who was produced by Adam Sandler's Happy Madison production. So she goes, "Hey, you guys want to come to the premiere?" And we said, absolutely. And she goes, well, the great part is the after party's at the Playboy Mansion, since part of the film's filmed at the Playboy Mansion. So that was the pinnacle. That was when we get to go to the Playboy Mansion with Adam Sandler, and you're taking shots with Adam Sandler at the Playboy Mansion,
You've arrived, man.
I've arrived, man. We're here.
Oh, shit, yeah.
My whole life had culminated into, yes, the trauma and everything I'd been through had led me to this moment where what kid doesn't want to go to Hollywood and get blown up on Hollywood sets and go to the Playboy Mansion with Adam Sandler? I have arrived. And all came freaking crashing down right after that.
So what happened?
So my brother, who is my best friend and my only sibling, brilliant mind, MBA from Georgetown, smart as could be, was working in Beverly Hills. He struggled with addiction, with cocaine and alcohol, and you name it. And he didn't show up for work one day. It was just right after the Playboy Mansion event. So I got the call. He didn't show up for work on a particular Monday. So I drive over to his house. I have my wife, and my son was almost a year old. Got him in the car seat. We walk into his house in the tucked away in the kind of cold, shadowy hills of Beverly Hills, and he had a couple roommates who were there. And I said, "Hey, have y'all seen Matt?" And they said, "No." And well, his car's here. And so I go up to his room and I check the door, and it's locked. And so I grab my phone out of my pocket and I call it one more time because he hadn't been answering his phone. And I hear his cell phone ringing on the other side of the door, and there's no answer. And so, knowing that he had struggled for years, I thought, suicide may not, isn't completely out of the question. He just had some demons that he could never shake. And I ended up just kicking the door in. The only thing I knew to do was just kick the door in, and I walked in and found him face down, dead from an overdose.
Oh man!
And he'd been there for 3 days, and just alone and isolated. Just losing my leg was one thing, but losing my brother, like as you can attest to, losing your wife. I mean, you can replace a leg with a prosthetic, like that's easy, but you can't replace another soul, another loved one.
Mm-hmm.
And so it got bad after that.
So leading up until this moment, I mean, you're still what kind of drugs or alcohol? Like, what's your situation as far as addiction leading up to the moment?
Mine's just like pain pills, Adderall, marijuana, and alcohol.
Okay.
So nothing too hardcore. I never really went into cocaine or heroin. Tried to keep it semi-respectable. But I thought life was manageable. I thought I was doing okay, but I wasn't. I had to I hired a personal assistant just to like take care of like bills and stuff, because just the stress of just the mail was like mail coming in was just too much for me. I couldn't even handle that. And so it wasn't anything hardcore, but it was enough to disrupt life and disrupt a marriage and have my wife. I mean, there's times my wife she came home from work. She was teacher at Bel Air Presbyterian preschool. So we had like this perfect, she's blonde hair, blue eye. I'm blonde hair, blue eye. We have this little, towhead kid that she takes up to the church every day when she goes to teach. She takes Larson up to preschool and to the nursery. So we had this on the outside, this perfect life. She's working at the church preschool, and I'm, quasi acting when I'm not, passed out. But she would come home. There's a few times she came home 4 or 5 in the afternoon. I'm just passed out in the bed. She'd call her dad going, well, he's breathing, but I don't know what he took, and I don't know how long he's been here, but he's alive, And then my brother's situation happened, and
so then what happened to you after that?
After that, we had already planned to move to Nashville, which is where we are now. My wife's from Chicago. It was too cold to go there. I'm from Texas. It was too hot to go there. We had already planned once we had our firstborn son, Larson. We said, we got to get out of California. It's just in the place we wanted to raise our kids, and it's too far away from family. So we decided on Nashville. We just didn't have a set date yet. But my brother died December 2008, and we left. We were out of there June 2009. And so we moved here to try to find some kind of new life. And I just brought me with me and struggled holding down, tried to just get a normal job. I got in with Dell. Oh my gosh.
Did you feel like you were leaving all of your dreams behind by leaving Hollywood?
Yes. Like all the hopes of more ego, the hopes of more fame. Yes. The hopes of, I want to be more, I want to be recognized more. Absolutely. Yeah. There was a void there of going, crud, man, this isn't really going to be an option anymore. But at the same time, I knew staying out there wasn't healthy. Mm-hmm. I did have enough sense to know that that wasn't a good place long-term for us to raise a family. So you're back in Nashville, and this is when things really go down the tubes. Yeah. I tried to put on the front and tried to just kind of get a normal job. I was in a call center at Dell Computer call center here in Nashville, just doing small business sales. Miserable. I mean, just
it's a far cry from the Playboy Mansion.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Ego took a hit, I'm just, what has life been reduced to? So then I'm drinking more, I'm drinking, at work, I'm sure people can relate to that. And I hate admitting it. And, but it's the truth is, when you're sitting at your desk with Gatorade and vodka at your desk, taking inbound sales calls for a company, it's a sign things aren't going too well.
Yeah.
And I thought it was the call center. I was like, man, I shouldn't be in a call center. I should be in a better situation. And so I interviewed for Dave Ramsey, the radio. He's got a syndicated radio show. He does personal finance, the Total Money Makeover. Are you familiar with him at all?
Totally.
Okay, so Dave Ramsey, Christian organization. I'm like, growing up in a Christian home, this would be a great fit. And so I started interviewing at Dave, and
he doesn't, and he says this publicly. He goes, I don't, every time I hire a crazy person, I let a crazy person in my organization, I figure out what door they came in and I close it by adding another layer of interviewing.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was interviewing in 2010, it was 7 interviews over 4.5 months. They spread it out. They don't want somebody to just come flying in to the organization. They want to make sure it's a good fit. You have to take like a personality test. They have a spousal interview where my wife and I went out to dinner with my would-be supervisor and his wife. Then he reports back to HR and Dave. Yes, this guy would be a good fit. No, he wouldn't be. But I had everybody fooled. I've been acting and taking acting classes for several years, and I had the act on. So I got in. And it was probably about 9 months or so before I got called into his office and sat down and was like, man, this isn't good when you get called into Dave Ramsey's office unannounced. And he just sat me down and said, look, man, he said, I can't help you in the way that you need help, but you obviously need some help. And so what I'm going to do is what I can do to help you is I can let you go so that you can go get the help that you need. And that was a godsend. I needed that. I needed that consequence.
What led him to believe that he needed to let you go? Like what were some of the things you were doing?
So he has rules. He has rules of no gossiping.
Mm-hmm.
And gossiping can mean going to somebody other than your direct manager to talk about something negative within the company. And it sounds, kind of militaristic or, maybe Hitler-like, but he has standards. It's his company. He can run things how he wants to run it. If you don't abide by the rules, then get out, And so one of them was I was going around talking to other people about, he has a group called the Speakers Bureau. And I was like, man, I want to do public speaking. I want to share my story. Although I'm showing up on, loaded on pills and alcohol to work many days, but yet I want to be on his speakers group and go out in the public eye and speak on his behalf. And so I started going up to like way around my manager to one of Dave's right-hand men going, hey, I've got a story I could share. And so that's one example is going around, people's back to go promote myself for a different job than what I was hired on for. Another example is I had an issue with the health insurance situation I had. And so I didn't go to my direct manager. I went to somebody on my team and I started, bitching and complaining about it. And that got back to my manager. He took it to his manager. I got called in. Hey, look, we have a policy here. This is a warning. If you go around, one more time, we're gonna have to let you go. So I didn't do that anymore, but I was, my performance was terrible. My work ethic was terrible. I'm smelling like, I'm looking and smelling hungover when I show up in the morning. That doesn't look good. I'm sure they saw slurring with the pills the pain pills I was on, and as much as I was drinking the night before. So things were adding up.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I had every right to be let go.
So what happens then?
So at that point, I called my wife for the first time, was honest, and said, look, I just got fired. I think I need help. And so that opened up the door to going, maybe I need some treatment. So the good thing is I had an opportunity to go get help. Bad thing was I didn't know where to go. Where do you turn to? Where do people go when they come up? Oh my gosh, I have a mental health or substance use disorder. I finally feel like I need help. Where do I turn to?
Well, what did you think was wrong at that time?
With me?
Yeah,
man. I mean, I knew. It's a good question. I knew I wasn't right.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I kept trying to put Band-Aids on. I knew I kept trying to just, well, maybe if I go work out, or maybe if I go to church, or maybe if I was trying to, I tried Celebrate Recovery, which is a, Christian approach to 12-step work. I wasn't willing to admit that I needed Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or one of these, old school 12-step programs. I was like, well, maybe I'm just bad enough to where I could go to Celebrate Recovery, where I could have a Christian kind of focused 12-step. And so I would show up to those, and I would lie. I mean, I would go to one of those, and afterwards I'd go have a beer. I'd grab a few beers on the way home, grab a couple 40 ounces on the way home from my Celebrate Recovery meeting. And so I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't know what it was. And what I have discovered is it came down to fear, came down to insecurity. It came down to, I'm just not living up to expectations. I'm trying to be what other people want me to be instead of me just being who God made me to be and who I was built to be.
God, that's such a hard, it's funny. I was talking to some kids the other day, like that panel I was telling you about earlier. And it's I'm trying to figure out how to communicate to people more effectively, like what that actually means, because it is totally true that you need to continually try to discover the person you are and live that life and all that kind of stuff. But when you tell people, you got to be the person God wants you to be, the person you're put on this earth, it just sounds like pablum.
Yeah.
And it's this, but it's like this never ending journey of consistently peeling back the onion, and it never stops. Right. But it's, man, that pressure we were talking about the stigma around mental health. And I think it was the first time I ever really thought about it, but as I was talking, I said, I think the stigma around mental health is really part of a greater stigma of not conforming, like not being, quote, normal, because that's what you're told to do, man. You get up, you're told when to show up at school. You're showed, your parents tell you how they want you to be. School tells you how you want you to be. Society tells you how they want you to be. You got to go to college, get a bunch of debt, get a job, get a house, climb, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, and when you don't fit into that, it's hard, man. It's hard to march to the beat of your own drummer. And sometimes I think that's the same thing with mental health. Even though we're all screwed up in our own way somehow, when we have something that afflicts us or that we're working through that makes us, quote, not normal, man, that's a hard thing to deal with. So
yeah, so hard, man. And I had to get to a point where it's like I needed other people to help me realize that, because in my own head, if I could have found an answer, I would have found an answer. I would have solved this. But I needed other people. I needed to open up to other people and say, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I don't even know what the problem is. I just know I'm screwed up. And I need some help. And so if you can get to, if people out there that are listening can get to a point where they can just go, maybe I just need to go talk to one person and just have a little bit of willingness to open the door and just start somewhere, because it uncovered this years of, and it's going to now go the rest of my life of uncovering, peeling back the layers. Like you say, it's just never ending process, but you got to start somewhere. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
So you ended up living, after all of this, we're still not done, because you end up living on the banks of a river.
Yeah. So I get fired by Dave Ramsey. I go to treatment, and I thought if I went to a high-end celebrity place out in Arizona, then I would get sober quicker, faster, and longer. And the pool volleyball was great, and the Reiki and the emotional release massage and all these kind of little bells and whistles that they had, but I never really got underneath the surface. And although I did a little bit of step work, I entered the trauma track, and I did a little bit of trauma work. It just scratched the surface. And so I had relapsed and was highly suggested by somebody here locally in the Nashville area that I go to this men's program, and it is called Stillwaters, and it is a rehab for big boys. And it's typically for chronic relapsers. And even though I hadn't been a chronic relapser at that point yet, I think they could see that I was going to be a chronic relapser, living, with the ego that I had. And I'd lied to myself for so long, I didn't even know I was lying to myself. But counselors in my IOP program could see it. So they're like, hey, we recommend this place. It's kind of hardcore, but they help you really get below the surface. And so I did step one, which is at the celebrity place, which took me about 45 minutes to present step one. It's about 7 questions to the group there. And admitted I was powerless over alcohol and that my life had become unmanageable. Pretty simple. One would think, okay, yeah, my life is unmanageable. Okay, I admit that to the group. I do a few questions. I get out. I'm drinking 3 days later. Okay, something didn't work. So I go to this other place, and man, did they tear me apart. And it was one of the best but worst experiences of my life. Step 1 was 70 questions in their book, and it took me 12 hours to present it to the group of 10 to 15 guys. And you sit around this room, and everybody's in a circle, and there's a counselor on the other side of the room with a table in the middle between me and the hot seat. There's this table with this snake, this stuffed rattlesnake that's, curled up with its fangs facing you. And the counselor sits behind that, and he's kind of running the show. But everybody gets involved. And so you may be on steps 37, and you may answer, whatever your answer is for 37, and then you go to 38, 39, and then somebody will stop you and go, hey, wait, 37 you said this, on 39 you said this. What the F are you lying about? And you're just like, wait, what? What are you talking about? Like, no, that's my answer. And they're like, dude, you've been lying to yourself for so long, you don't even know that you're lying. And so essentially what the program was is they kind of pull your soul out and they hold it out in front of you and they make you look at it and they tell you what you're missing. And they say, we may want to look at it a little bit different way this time. And so it's not for everybody. It's not an approach, but it's basically how 12-step was initially, when it's a life or death situation. And if you don't get to the root of what's really going on inside of you, then you're going to die. And so a counselor told me on step 2, we get to step 2, and he throws his book down and he goes, his name's Jason. I'm never going to forget Jason. He throws his book down and he goes, look, I'm going to tell you this because nobody out there is going to tell you this. But all you are in your addiction is a crippled effing drunk. That's all. If you can get to the point where you can accept the fact that you're just a garden variety drunk like the rest of us, and you're not somebody special, then maybe you can start making some progress in your recovery. Otherwise, you're going to be buried next to your brother. And it was like a ton of bricks, man. Just boom. Like nobody's ever talked to me like that. Do you know who I know?
Yeah.
You know whose phone numbers I have in my phone? You know what my bank account looks like from my settlement? You can't talk to me like that. But I needed that. I needed that at that time. And so sometimes, man, we need to surround ourselves with people who love us deeply and love us in a way that, for me, man, my parents enabled me. My parents they lost a son already to this disease. They didn't want to lose another one. So they danced real lightly around, my shenanigans and relapses and my kind of half-ass in a program. But I needed that kind of in your face approach at that point in time. And I'm grateful for that. And it didn't just all magic, it wasn't like everything just magically disappeared, all my problems and everything was fine, but it was part of my journey. I had a few relapses after that, but I'm so blessed right now to be able to say that after my last relapse a little over 2 years ago, I was, by the grace of God, a representative from a company called Addiction Campuses came in to my wife took me to hospital after I had relapsed. She didn't know what I had in my system. I passed out in a doctor's office after taking some Klonopin. I was struggling with some nerve pain in my leg, even after a relapse, even after seeing a pain doctor who knows I'm in recovery. I said, I need something. I can't sleep for days at a time because of this nerve pain in my leg. I can't take narcotics. Do you have something else? And he said, well, I can give you something, but I need your wife to manage it for you. And I said, okay. And I didn't do that. And so I managed it myself. And 3 days later, I was passed out in a doctor's office, and they called my wife to come pick me up. And I ended up in the hospital. She didn't know what I took or how much it was. And she thought I was going to die. And a representative from Addiction Campuses just happened to be passing through the floor, came in, introduced herself, and I was on a plane to our Dallas facility the next day. And I've been sober since then, and I've been working for the company since then. And I've got this is crazy, man, to go from I have nothing I lived in a trailer before this last relapse. Back up for a sec. Wife kicked me out of the house after one of my relapses, and I'm living in a trailer. And I have a slide when I give talks, man. I have the slide where I have the picture of the Playboy Mansion, and I have a picture of the double wide trailer I was living in.
I think you sent that to me, didn't you?
I may have.
Yeah, I'll definitely include that because it's let's put it this way: the contrast is stark.
Yes, yes. And that's what my addiction wants me. That's what my addiction's going to do. It doesn't matter how much money I have or what education I have. I'm just a garden variety drunk and person with mental health, issues like anybody else. And if I don't get help, if I had cancer and I didn't tell anybody about it and I didn't get help for it, it's freaking going to kill me, or it's going to get close to killing me, or my life's going to be significantly affected by it. Same thing with addiction and mental health. If you don't go get treatment for it, you don't go get help on a consistent basis, it'll take you down. And
so let me ask you a question. So I think one of the things that I see quite commonly, and it's something that I kind of have been struggling with a little bit lately, in the sense that all the people I talk to, and people that respond to me through the podcast, and people in the Mental Health Warriors group, I see so often where people look at, not everybody obviously, but there's a lot of people who look at their quote diagnosis of whatever, and they use it to absolve themselves of responsibility, or some level of responsibility for taking ownership over their situation and doing something about it. So because I think, like, so many people are victims of just unproductive thought patterns. Like, you're continually doing dumb stuff. You're making bad choices. Or choices that don't create what you want. But people feel like they're almost sometimes like a passenger in their own life, versus, and I have so much empathy, because I know that when you are in a really bad spot, or if you haven't, if you've suffered adverse childhood experiences, or you haven't been given the tools by your parents, by the school system, to develop that sense of, sovereignty over your own self, and that sense of self-awareness. Like, when you run into, huge challenges in your life that we're all going to run into at some point, man, when someone doesn't have the tools to do anything about it, that's tough to watch. But at the same time, you're the only one who can be responsible for yourself. And I'm trying to, my head reconcile those two opposing ideas, So in your situation, though, I guess, what are some of the most important lessons that you've learned about just that, about ownership, and how to seize control back of your own situation and do something different?
Dude, that's huge. That's so awesome. Great insight, and great pulling that up to the surface out of this conversation, because because some people are so overwhelmed, they don't know where to go, where to start. And so I just started trying one thing after another, after another, after another, after another. And I have a slide when I give my talks where I say, people ask me, how did I get from living in that trailer to now working for an amazing organization where we're a place, we take 13,000 calls a month and place people in treatment all across the country, here in the United States. And we're only 3.5 years old. We have 750 employees, and I'm just blessed to be able to be on the front lines of that, and have a podcast and interview people from Corn and all these cool walks of life like I get to do. How did I do it? I did it by admitting that I needed help and start talking to people, and started off with a therapist. And a therapist would recommend a book. So I looked at that book. Now a therapist recommends, hey, why don't you try this graphic narrative? Let's try graphic narrative. I try that. Now there's EMDR, eye movement desensitization, and reprogramming or reprocessing. That's a therapeutic modality. Mm-hmm. There's another one called brain spotting. It's a little harder to find a therapist that does brain spotting, but it can significantly help somebody process trauma more quickly. Similar to EMDR, but it's called brain spotting. I started to meditate for the first time. I just started trying new things. And so in my slide, when I give talks about how did I get from the trailer to what I'm doing today, I click the button one at a time, and I have about 40 different things that show up. One of them is doing laundry. Simple thing of doing laundry. So I had a sponsor, and part of working a 12-step program, a sponsor or 12-step programs promote doing service work. And so I asked my sponsor, hey, do I need to be going downtown Nashville and working at the soup kitchen or delivering, food to homeless people, or what do I need to do? And he goes, how about you be of service in your own freaking home? Why don't, instead of trying to go downtown and like start some nonprofit organization or something, why don't you just do laundry? I was like, what? That's
Boom.
stupid. That's stupid.
Isn't that freaking awesome advice, though, eh?
Just simple. Man, now guess what? I do the laundry at the house. I do the grocery shopping as much as I can because, one, it's therapeutic. It helps me get outside of myself, and it helps my wife, and it helps me connect with my family in a way that says, hey, Dad's here to help. Dad can be accountable. I can be held accountable for something simple like doing laundry. So I guess I could go on. Essential oils is another one. The meditation app on my phone is another one. Exercise. Now I do boxing. Boxing has been a huge outlet for me to be able to go and take out anger. I'm not an angry person. I never really grew up around people expressing anger, so I didn't know how to do that. But as soon as I found a punching bag, I just started wailing on it, and I found huge benefits. And so I go to Title Boxing's place I go to 4 or 5 times a week to unload emotions on a bag in a healthy way, and it really helps clear my mind. So you try new things and you don't give up.
Yeah, I love that. And I think too, people need to understand that the path from point A to point B, or from starting point to whatever you think the destination is, first of all, it's not linear. It's never going to be linear. So as you try, and I think that's sometimes what happens to us is we think it is going to be, and we get derailed when something happens, right? So, but it's like, I'm going to try this. Oh, and by trying this, I might run face first into some limiting belief I hold or some baggage that I'm carrying around. And maybe I need to deal with that. And then I'm going to try something else. Oh, and that person introduced me to this person. So, and blah, blah, blah. And eventually it's, instead of being linear, it's almost like a spider web.
Yes.
You've got all of these and it all builds on itself. And when we look at, like for me, I see what I was afraid of when I was drinking really heavily. I was afraid of being in the fucking pain I knew I needed to feel. So I would stop. I tried to quit drinking a million times, and it was like, it would be like this itch I could not scratch, but I didn't. So then I would quit because I thought I was going insane, but I never stopped and tried to just, why am I feeling this way? Like, I never asked that question. I just wanted to make it go away. But what would have happened if I sat in the frickin' pain? And I finally, once I stopped drinking, I allowed myself to do that. And now that I'm not drinking and I'm not numbing my emotions, I mean, I have a 1,000 times better life than I've ever had before. I've helped lots of people. But you know what? I still have moments of when I feel a lot of anxiety or, feeling overwhelmed with things or unsure of myself. And now, though, I just let myself experience it because there's so many freaking lessons you can learn in those moments, just like you can in the good moments. So yeah, I love what you said there. It's just get out of your own head and just plod forward.
Try something new, be creative.
Yeah,
tap into your own creativity. And oh my God, hey, there's a book. Have you ever heard of Pam Grout?
No.
Pam Grout. She has a book called E Squared, and my therapist had recommended it to me. And it's these like 9 simple experiments that help show that there's a quantum field out there and there's an energy field out there available to us that we can tap into. And one of the most profound experience to me was if you have take 2 wire coat hangers. Take 2 wire coat hangers and you undo them and put them in like the shape of an L, and you hold them in your hands. And you actually put a straw over the part that are holding in your hands. So you're almost like holding 2 guns. Mm-hmm. And when you sit there and hold these L-shaped wire coat hangers and you think of something positive, all you have to do is think of a positive thought. They open up and they start to swing away from you. And then she says, now think of something negative. So you think of some negative thought, my wife passing away, being at the burial site when my wife died, or, you start thinking of something negative. The coat hangers start turning inward, and they start closing off, and they come into your, into closer to your body. And then you do it again. Think of something positive, and the freaking things just rotate outwards. You don't have to move. You're not moving your hands at all. And so that's just one experiment of this book, Pam Grout. And I actually just reached out to her because her book and her little simple little energy experiments were so profound for me a couple of years ago when my therapist recommended the book. I sent her an email yesterday saying, hey, I'd love to have you on my podcast. Would you be willing to? And she responded immediately saying, yes, absolutely. Let's do it in the next few weeks.
Fantastic.
So that's just another resource. So just, man, don't give up, people, even when and you're going to make progress and you're going to go backwards. You're going to make progress and you're going to go backwards, but you just can't give up. You got to keep trying. If something's working for you, keep doing it. If something's not working, try something new.
Yeah, absolutely. And just tell yourself that those steps backwards are part of going forward.
Yes. Yeah. Don't resist those. Welcome those and say, hey, man, that didn't work out. Now all of a sudden, my wife and I still today, I mean, we're not, it's not great. I mean, she's still struggling with all the, 13 years of chaos.
Sure. And,
we go backwards a little bit. Hey, that's part of the process, and that's okay. But I don't have to go through it alone. I can go to my sponsor. I can talk openly about it with her. We can, keep putting one foot in front of the other, even though it's not going forward all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, man, this has been great. God, we've been talking for a long time. Holy crap. So maybe before we wrap up here, tell the listeners about your podcast.
So yes, dude, this is awesome. One, I love the name that our creative team came up with at Addiction. So Addiction Campuses, where I work, we're based out of Nashville. We take 13,000 calls a month into our call center. We have 4 treatment centers throughout the United States, one in Massachusetts, Ohio, Texas, and Mississippi. But we don't have a treatment center in Nashville. It's just where our headquarters are. Again, 750 employees, and we're continuing to grow. And we operate from a heart of compassion. And I had been to other treatment centers prior to. What makes us stand out over the others is the compassionate heart that all of our CEOs and all of our nurses, master's level therapists, everybody to the cooks and the landscaping staff operate from a real heart of love and compassion that you don't always get at other treatment centers. And as part of our marketing efforts, my role is the director of public outreach. And so one of the things I get to do is do a podcast. And I've had Chuck Negron from Three Dog Night on. I've had Todd Harrell from Three Doors Down. I've had a couple of members of the band Korn. I've had my trauma therapist who helped me with that graphic narrative on. I've had Johan Hari, who's the author of Chasing the Scream. And so I'm blessed to be able to, we just landed an interview yesterday. We're going to be interviewing one of the most decorated 4-star generals in American military history, General Barry McCaffrey.
Oh, I've heard of him, yeah. He's
the first drug czar who was appointed by President Clinton in the 90s. We're going to have him on in the coming weeks. So high sobriety, please take a look at that.
Yeah, we'll definitely link to that in the show notes page for sure.
Please do. Thank you for letting me talk about it.
Yeah, man. Well, hey, listen, thank you so much for reaching out and being a guest on the show and for sharing your story, man. It is incredible to say the least. And these are the conversations like this, which are why I do the podcast. So you brighten my Saturday morning, and I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Love what you're doing, man. Keep up the great work. And if there's anything I can do to help you or your listeners out in the future, don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay, brother. Take care, man.
All right. God bless you.
Okay. Well, even though I don't drink anymore, I'm not going to lie to you. Partying at the Playboy Mansion, there's something that just seems like kind of bucket listy about that. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the episode. And John's story is just obviously one of, persistence and taking a knee getting himself up, dusting himself off, and plowing forward. It's obvious that, the support of John's incredible, incredible wife was instrumental in him even being here today. And thanks for coming on, brother, and being so goddamn honest about your story, man. It's just, that's what this podcast is all about. And I love it because I get the chance to talk to amazing people like you. So, and if you hear that sound right now, can you hear that? So at the beginning of the episode, that was actually my kids were making cookies and all hopped up on chocolate. And what you hear now is actually the bathtub being drained because I'm kind of right by the pipe. So I say this like, I've said this before, but if you think this podcasting thing is glamorous, it's not really, right? The output is amazing, but we work in the conditions that we have to work with and we make the best of it. So when I say we, I mean me. So there you go. But I'm going to end this episode like I end every single episode, and that's by saying, if you take a bath, consider reusing the water because it's good for the earth. No, that's not how I end every one. I end every episode by saying, listen, if you've struggled, I want you to know that I have struggled too. And if you ever want to fucking talk to me, I will not judge you. And listen, please consider giving that gift to somebody else. You can change a life and you can change your own. And it's a gift you have the power to give. So we're going to see you on the other side of the Mental Health Warriors, or on the next episode of the Mental Health Warriors podcast. And I'm going to try to coordinate my recording of the podcast with no bath activity or no shower activity in this house. The problem is I've got a 14-year-old girl, I've got an almost 13-year-old girl, and I've got a wife. So let's put it this way. Getting into the shower can be challenging, but I do my best. That's why I try to get up early. I always say I get up early because I want to, practice my morning routine. It's actually just to get in the fucking shower. That's really what it's all about. So guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for being supporting the show. And I love you guys. And we'll see you on the next episode.